I am done explaining to all of you that these changes will continue whether you like them or not.
And what about if we refuse?
I'm actually very glad that you asked that, Bruce. If I do not see a marked increase in our audience by the end of the year, I'll see no need to continue this particular venture.
Wait. You cannot shut down yesterday's news today. I remember that much. That was specified in the contract that we signed, Scarlett.
You're quite correct, Jonathan. I cannot end yesterday's news today, but there is nothing in our contract that says any of you must remain a part of it. All right. I think that was a productive and enlightening staff meeting. Now, it's about time that you all record this week's episode.
Oh, as good a time as any.
And I would make it a good one. I'm going to sit in this week and specify adjustments as I see fit.
Well, boss, I do hope you enjoy the show.
So do I, Jonathan. So do I.
Hello, dear audience, and welcome to yesterday's news today. We begin with the ongoing...
All right, hold on.
Wow, already, that was quick.
Denberg, where's the intro gone?
We got rid of it and replaced it with those cold opens instead.
Well, that was a terrible idea.
Something we actually agree upon.
And whose idea was that?
It was mine, actually. I am sorry.
It wasn't that dumb of an idea, Denberg. It just wasn't great. The intro really helped listeners get a feel for the show. It evoked the time and place and the goals of the whole production. Much better than hearing all of you argue about workplace politics for multiple minutes at the beginning each week.
You are so very right. How could I be so stupid?
You aren't that stupid, Denberg. I mean, how about we roll that intro?
We may have to re-record it, actually.
And why is that?
I may have originally mispronounced Jonathan's name.
How'd you say it?
McMalley.
What bourgeois, truly. My name is not that difficult. McNally. McNally. Why don't you say it with me, Denberg?
Seems we've hit an unexpected trigger.
I know it now, Jonathan, and maybe if you had actually listened to my hard work before, we could have resolved the issue then.
Oh, and that somehow justifies your actions.
I do believe it does, Mr. McMalley.
Ooh,
Enough. In the words of you, Mr. McNally, this is a new show. Shall we get to it?
We shall. Yes, we shall. Apologies, dear listeners. I am not sure what came over me. This week, our top story is about the ongoing coronavirus pandemic.
Really? Again?
Do you have something to add, Scarlett?
Not yet. Carry on.
As of Friday, more than 1 out of every 5,000 Americans are currently hospitalized with COVID-19. More than 13,000 are said to be in intensive care units. November has set new records for cases of the virus in the United States, with 170,000 new cases on Friday. The increase isn't localized in any one place either. All 50 states are seeing this upward trend, and it is taking place in both rural and urban areas. Several countries in Europe are also seeing massive new waves of coronavirus and have begun implementing restrictions and lockdowns. The best news comes out of France, which after its second week of national lockdown has seen new infections reduced. The United States, meanwhile, grapples with such decisions as new cases surge. President-elect Joseph R. Biden Jr. spoke at length about the needs for the country to combat the pandemic, while current President Donald J. Trump had been largely silent on the matter for over a week. He did break his silence partway through last week with an address in the Rose Garden. This statement included no mention of any ways to curtail the current climb in cases. He instead took time to laud a vaccine under development by Pfizer that appears to be 90% effective. It could begin helping vulnerable populations by mid-December, but wouldn't be widely available for distribution until the spring of 2021. Due to the lack of safeguards implemented by the federal government, governors and mayors are finding these issues passed on to them. Many are considering partial lockdowns and restrictions, but fear angry backlash as a result. Many local economies are still faltering, and many citizens are frustrated with the constraints that for many have cost jobs, businesses, and livelihoods. Amidst a flurry of protests and lawsuits, Mayor Lori Lightfoot called for lockdowns after experts showed her projections of at least 1,000 more Chicagoans dying by year's end unless immediate action was taken. She said of the matter, "People are dying. We're seeing a daily uptick. This is literally a matter of life and death. Many other leaders will need to make similarly difficult choices if they hope to prevent widespread deaths." Now that I'm done, do you have anything to add, Scarlett?
It's just, don't you think the whole coronavirus thing is a bit played out at this point?
Played out.
I think people are sick of hearing about it. It is a bit of a downer, really.
That may very well be, but for the nearly 70,000 people in hospitals today, and the loved ones of the 240,000 dead in America alone, I feel that they do not think it is played out.
Perhaps we could just limit our coverage on it going forward for something a bit flashier.
Ah, yes. Flashier. And now I suppose we should move on to this week's sponsor. Though are we even pretending to have one this week, Denberg? Or should we skip this part altogether?
Do you want me to tell him, ma'am?
I will let you do the honors, Denberg.
This week, everyone, we have a real, honest-to-God sponsor.
As in an actual company that is helping to fund the show.
Precisely, Jonathan.
Wait a minute, did I hear that right?
A real sponsor? Oh, boy!
How can this be?
Because Scarlett knows what she is doing, Mr. McNally. Now, if I might continue.
Be my guest.
Stay sane is the mantra of Day Off Ltd. And in a year like the one we have all had, it is a message that resonates. But how does Day Off help one achieve such zen? Well, with the unique and lively design work of longtime friends Bridget and Luke. Their cute and psychedelic creations can be the perfect addition to a home or even a wardrobe. In their shop, which resides on the information superhighway, there are fruit salad shorts, rugs with bugs, and printed designs that evoke simpler times. If one looks hard enough, they may even find a tufted wall decoration in the shape of a rather joyful uterus, the proceeds of which will support Planned Parenthood. Of additional interest to listeners, the dynamic duo also take on commissioned work. You can stay sane knowing they can create whatever custom concept your cranium can contemplate. A link to their incredible work may be found in the description down below.
Thank you, Denberg. An excellent advertisement for an excellent company. Wouldn't you say, Jonathan?
Of course, Scarlett. And, I suppose, thank you both.
That is what I am here for. Now, I do believe it's about time for...
Strangely true local news.
Hello, hello! I have all my stories right here.
And who is this?
Archie.
I do not remember an Archie being involved in the show when we started this endeavor.
He wasn't with us at the start, but he has become an integral member of this team.
That is certainly up for discussion.
Also, I tell of the ne'er-do-wells and rabble-rousers that lurk on the dark corners of the World Wide Web, and sometimes even our very own government, in my Conspiracy Corner segment.
Oh, you're that Archie. This should be good. Carry on.
Our first story is about an Arkansas man sentenced to more than 100 years in prison for a fatal shooting over unwanted mayonnaise on his hamburger order. At the time...
No. That is much too dark. People enjoy this segment because it's fun and lighthearted. It's a distraction from the terror and mayhem and the rest of the news. Archie, we really don't need you for this.
I am sorry. I just thought it was cautionary, like... a fable about the dangers of unchecked aggression, or I just, it was... Mr. McNally, sir?
Archie.
I only ever wanted to do a good job. Goodbye, everyone.
Denberg, I imagine you have something prepared.
Of course I do.
Jonathan, please continue.
This is not right. Cannot Archie read...
No, Jonathan, Archie cannot. You'll read the stories that Denberg has provided. Now, please.
Our next story is about the president of Turkmenistan, Gurbanguly Berdimuhammedov, who, on Thursday, unveiled a 19-foot sculpture covered in gold leaf depicting his favorite dog. The statue of the Alabai, or Central Asian Shepherd Dog, was erected atop a stone plinth with wraparound screens playing moving images of dogs. The streets around were closed for singing and dancing spectators. In 2015, President Berdy Muhammedov unveiled another gold statue of himself atop a galloping horse. He claimed at the time the statue was built in response to demands from the public. Human Rights Watch reports that the Turkmenistan government's human rights record is dire and remains, quote, isolated and repressive under authoritarian rule, end quote.
No. What about fun and lighthearted? Don't you understand? How did you make a giant puppy statue into something depressing? Jonathan, let's just move on to the main story. What have you got?
It was going to be Archie telling about the questionable tactics used by police and governments to combat the Black Lives Matter protests.
Oh, I don't like that at all.
How am I not surprised? I am not sure what you want me to report then. That is what we had prepared.
Denberg, you have been a great help this week. I'm sure you have something to report on.
Really? You're letting me report on a story?
Sure, why not?
This is what I've always wanted.
Really? I never knew.
Of course you didn't.
All right, Denberg, what do you have for us?
I have this story I have been working on about the modern space race.
Oh, I don't like that. Average Americans couldn't care less about outer space.
That was somewhat what the story was about.
Why don't we talk about the election?
We did, last week.
Yes, but people are still discussing it. The results are getting clicks.
I feel the major news outlets are covering this more than enough. And folks have heard more than they care to.
Jonathan, let's cover whatever will please the search algorithm, and then maybe we can continue having sponsors, okay? So please, if you have any notes on the election that you can give Denberg, and Denberg, whenever you are ready.
Good work, Denberg. And good luck.
Jonathan, I didn't mean to.
It is what it is.
So, here we are. The election. 2020. Where do we go from here? The results are in, and there are likely about half of Americans who are quite dissatisfied with the outcome, and the other half are currently feeling some form of relief. No matter which way your politics lean, the future that's in store for this country is probably far different than your current perception. We here at Yesterday's News Today are by no means soothsayers nor clairvoyants, but that does not mean we cannot look at the data, the evidence, and the opinions of experts and try to glean some ideas to what comes next for the United States of America. In his address to the American people following his election, President-elect Joseph R. Biden Jr. called for unity, saying that this is the time to heal America. But in this time of great divisiveness, is there any hope for that? If you look to the current president's actions, perhaps not. Donald J. Trump has as yet refused to concede. This has sown distrust in the election process and, as a result, our very democracy. His campaign has pursued several lawsuits, most claiming that there was voter fraud or that votes were not counted properly. In Pennsylvania and Georgia, they have made claims that late votes were counted. In Michigan, there were claims that there was a lack of transparency about the vote count process. And in Arizona, there was #SharpieGate. Something spread via social media saying that ballots were rejected for having been filled out with permanent markers. This and many allegations by the Trump campaign have had no evidence provided to back them up. While wins on some of these suits could potentially flip states where the margin was tight, they are unlikely to reverse the overall outcome of the election, as Mr. Biden is projected to win 306 of the needed 270 electoral votes and is up by almost 6 million in the popular vote. Meanwhile, judges are throwing out most of these lawsuits and many others are not forecast to be successful. So, why do it? It could very well be strategic. Not in an attempt to overturn the election, but rather in a bid for the presidency in 2024. Axios reports that the president has already been discussing with advisors thoughts of running in 4 years, and putting forth the idea that supporters must come to the voting booths in force to combat an inflation of Democrat votes could help his chances in future elections. Political experts rather say the chances are not great for Mr. Trump winning a second non-consecutive term based on his current approval rating and past historical precedent. but bolstering support could help him in future business ventures, particularly in media, which might further embolden and possibly grow his base. Such continued support could be seen this Saturday as thousands rallied in Washington, D.C., claiming that President Trump won his second term. The event went by several names, including the Million MAGA March, the March for Trump, and Stop the Steal D.C. In attendance were the Women for America First and members of the white nationalist group, the Proud Boys. Mr. Trump even stopped by, waving at the demonstrators from within his motorcade. Hours later, a scuffle did break out between rally-goers and counter-protesters, but police in riot gear largely kept these two groups apart. This event follows on the heels of similar demonstrations across the country, including a large gathering in Dallas last Monday. While many Republicans back the president's contesting the election, there are certainly those who have called for him to concede. Many GOP leaders have at the very least acknowledged Mr. Biden's win, including Senator Mitt Romney, George and Jeb Bush, Senator Susan Collins, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, and Florida Representative Francis Rooney. But this does not at all indicate a rosy return to times before such a vast bipartisan rift. In the House, Democrats now have a smaller majority, and at present the Senate is still in the hands of the GOP. This will make it quite difficult for the progressive proposals of President-elect Biden to become policy. There is the small chance that the Senate will change hands with the results of the Georgia runoff elections in January. Democrats seem confident that demographic shifts and the party's momentum within the state favor their win, but historically runoffs have favored Republicans. Further hurdles for progressive policy come in the form of the now right-leaning Supreme Court and the over 200 federal judges that were appointed by President Trump. In the event that Mr. Biden can implement what he has spoken to in his campaign, there would be quick action on coronavirus, including stimulus and prevention, but also potential restrictions and mandates. Protections of Obamacare are likely, as well as reforms to criminal justice. The president-elect has also spoken of a renewed focus on combating climate change, including rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement. This pairs with his campaign rhetoric about mending ties with allies around the world. The problem with all of this is that it all runs quite counter to what many have deemed Trumpism. And experts have said that the grand old party appears to have, in part, allowed for the old ways of Reaganism to fall to the new order of Trump's ideology. This has been a political movement based on anti-immigration, America First trade regulations, and a rejection of social progressivism. But more than any of that, it has been first and foremost a rejection of anything Democrat. So whether Mr. Biden is successful in what he hopes to achieve, or if his proposals languish in a deadlocked Congress, the result may be the same. More Americans at odds with each other over ideals that are so very different. A rejection of the differences in the ideas and identities of one another. This all sounds quite bleak, but perhaps there is hope. This past election showed an America that cared about the political process. 2020 had the highest voter turnout in over a century, and by the results of exit polls, the racial gap between the two parties is actually shrinking. Also, there was an acknowledgement of people of color and LGBTQ candidates in positions that they had never been elected to before. In our very first episode of Yesterday's News Today, I spoke of the unshakable American spirit, despite it being in a somewhat humorous faux advertisement, and even with all that has happened in this nation, my belief in that remains steadfast. We are an extremely diverse people, all with unique beliefs and ideals, and each of those combined make us who we are. It will not be easy, but one day we may look to those far different than ourselves and see that we are all one and the same. We are people with hopes and dreams. We are Americans, and when that day comes, we will truly be the United States of America. And that does it for our show, I believe. Jonathan, what did you think of that story? Jonathan? Jonathan? He's gone, kid. Oh. Did you like it? A bit sappy for my taste, but it was nowhere near as bad as my 20-minute climate change rant, so there is that.
Never again, Denberg. Never again. Didn't realize how much that voice grates when you hear it at length. Now, Denberg, let's end this.
Do you mean I cannot report on any more stories?
Essentially. It's just not meant to be.
Oh, I didn't think I did that bad of a job.
You tried your best. Now, about that outro.
Yes, whatever you say, ma'am. This program was written and performed by Roger J. Thacher and Dennis Shanaberg, with Caitlin Wolfe as Scarlett Murdoch, and additional research by Amy Lee Nieves. You are encouraged to obtain a subscription to this broadcast with the simple selection of a button below. Furthermore, you can indicate your appreciation by giving us the old thumbs up. Did you have any thoughts about any of our stories? Please comment them below. Or to read those of our newsmen, tune your Twitter to @RadioYNT. And as always, be sure to tune in next week to hear tomorrow's news of yesterday. Then.